And it's like that one actually we ended up turning around and just going back. Yeah, I think I'm done here, especially when my brakes were smoked on the van. So, um, but with all that, we had a little issue with the tongue on there, and a bit of a story, and I'm not going to go into it this morning. But I found an 85-year-old, actually an Alaskan native, up in northern Utah, in the middle of nowhere. Literally, I had a little shop that was able to fix up my trailer for me so we could keep going. And I mean, I'm like, what are we going to do out here? This thing is breaking, and if it finished breaking, I didn't know what was going to happen. And there's this 85-year-old Native Alaskan up there. We had an amazing conversation. He actually moved there when he was 5 before there was a moved to a place of destruction day by dog sled. With all that actually moved there. So him and I had an amazing, amazing conversation. But again, we saw such incredible sights. This is actually one of the places where we camped. We opened our van doors, and this was our view. Kind of tough, having a view like that. Same thing with that one. I just kind of have tough having a view like that right out the van window when you wake up in the morning. But we had a great trip, and it's a lot of just I don't even know how to express some things as far as being away in 6 weeks. I've never done that before. Really don't ever want to do it. But there's still nothing like getting home and being with our family. I even got to finish out the trip. We swung back through Montana and visited son and family out there, and got to attend my high school class reunion. I'm not going to say what year it was, but I got to attend my high school class reunion. And I'm telling you what, them people are old. They just, what can I say, man? But that was fun getting to reconnect with some high school classmates and finish off the trip. But it is so good to be home. We want to say thanks to those participating in the financial life here. However you're doing it, there's an offering container back in the entry. Right next to it's a credit debit card reader. But this, however you do, we just want to say thank you for your participation. Luke 12:29, Jesus says, what I'm trying to do here is to get you to relax, not be so preoccupied with getting, so you can respond to God's giving. And that's what our giving is. It's a response to God's giving. Thanks for partnering with us in that. Before I went on the sabbatical, we've been working our way through kind of the life of Peter and his writings, and we've been in First Peter. And guess what? We're going to just jump right back into that this morning. We're going to go to First Peter chapter 5. Where we're going to go today. Peter talks to us a little bit about leadership. It's his final chapter of First Peter. He addresses some very important comments in this chapter to young and old alike, to leaders and to followers. So today we're going to look at Peter's comments to leaders. Next week, Lord willing, we'll look at his comments to followers. One of the things I think we all understand is that solid, sound leadership in any area is so important, especially when things get difficult. Not if things get difficult, because they're going to. When things get difficult, you need that sound, solid leadership. So just the first 4 verses of 1 Peter chapter 5 we're going to look at today. And Peter writes a special message to the leaders of the church to encourage them to do their work faithfully. We're going to just read through it, then we'll come back and unpack it because it's only 4 verses. And now a word to you who are elders in the churches. I too am an elder and a witness to the suffering of Christ. And I too will share his glory and his honor when he returns. As a fellow elder, this is my appeal to you. Care for the flock of God entrusted to you. Watch over it willingly, not grudgingly. Not for what you will get out of it, but because you are eager to serve God. You aren't lord it over the people assigned you care, but lead them by your good example. And when the head shepherd comes, your reward will be a never-ending share. So we're going to talk directly about church leadership, part of this certainly. New Testament churches were organized under the leadership of elders and deacons. And there's been a lot of stuff back and forth through the years, a lot of theologians debating and all kinds of stuff on these terms and all of that. But I just want to try to boil it down a little bit. It seems that the words elder and bishop refer to the same thing. Elder refers to the person, while bishop seems to refer to the office. An elder is most commonly for us associated with a pastor or another word, an overseer. But I believe also as we look at this morning, there's an understanding that this leadership dynamic has a broader application toward all church leadership. And I want us to remember the setting of the people that Peter's writing this to. Many of these leaders were really fairly new believers themselves. I mean, Christianity itself, this life in Christ, was a really new dynamic. There wasn't a structured training program. There was no college. There was no seminary. There was nothing like that. So they're really new believers themselves. But Peter writes to them concerned that the leadership in the local church be at its best. Because they were new believers, did not diminish the need for solid, sound leadership. And in fact, they were already a very suffering church under persecution. And Peter knew that was going to get worse. And the worse it got, the more solid leadership they were going to need. So he gives them some personal qualities, really 3 of them that we're going to look at today. Personal qualities that really make for successful leadership. Now, these 3, they aren't all inclusive. There's more than this, but this is what Peter gives to them in this little bite here. But as we go into it, I want to just maybe, that these leadership principles apply to other areas besides the church. Just maybe these leadership principles would apply in business, in a job setting. And I think maybe even more so than that, these leadership principles just maybe might apply to the family. So we're going to look at it in kind of a broader way. So these leadership principles, what are they? Well, first of all, the first one that Peter talks about is a vital personal experience. That's number 1. A vital personal experience with Christ. Let's go back and start to unpack these verses. Chapter 5, verse 1. And now a word to you who are elders in the churches. I too am an elder and a witness to the sufferings of Christ. And I too will share in his glory and his honor when he returns. As a fellow elder, this is my appeal to you. Now it's interesting to note here, even as Peter kind of reintroduces himself as the author of this letter, he doesn't introduce himself as this apostle or this great spiritual leader, kind of maybe the the lead pastor, the senior pastor of the church in Jerusalem. No, that's not how he introduces himself. He simply introduces himself as another elder, a fellow traveler on this journey with him. I too am an elder. So he puts himself right in with them. But he mentions here in a witness to the sufferings of Christ. He mentions that he had personally witnessed Christ's suffering. Peter being one of those inner three in Jesus' inner circle. And throughout this chapter, and really through all of Peter's writings, he writes from his own personal experiences. He's not writing this out of some kind of book learning. You know, Peter went to the school of hard knocks. He walked this out with Jesus. And so what does he draw on? He doesn't draw, well, you know, in seminary they taught me this. You know, or, hey, you know, after I got out of, you know, all the college and all that stuff, you know, I took this leadership class. And this is kind of what they told me. He writes it out of his own personal experiences. Now, let me just say, you know, college, seminary, all those things, good things. Leadership classes, all that stuff, good stuff. But it cannot replace a personal relationship with Christ. A lot of years ago, when I was on staff in a church in Montana, it was back in my hometown where I grew up. I was on staff with my dad was my lead pastor. It was the church I grew up in. And but I remember meeting with some of the other ministers in town. And there was one I'd known for quite a while, pastor of one of the Lutheran churches in town. And two of his kids were in my class in school. And I'd known them for years. And he was telling me about one of his kids had gone to a job fair, you know, where, you know, they just got all these different businesses and all this different stuff, you know, that comes into like a high school gym or whatever. And a student can come in and just kind of peruse through all there and just kind of see what all these different job opportunities possibly could be out there. Just do a job fair. And this pastor, he's really upset that one of the booths in the job fair was pastoring. He's like, what on earth are they doing? Bringing in pastoring and church leadership as nothing more than a job opportunity. Hey, you can go over here, you can work in this factory, here's their booth. Or you know, you can go to college and, you know, okay, and here's you know, a deal and all the, you know, majors and the stuff you can do. And then here, maybe you might want to just become a pastor. And I'll be honest, I don't know who would want to do this job by choice. Seriously, without God's call, I've been doing this for a long time. And in no way that I would have stuck with this job if it wasn't for God's call. At one point, I actually had an opportunity. I was working a side job to help pay the bills. I was an EMT with an ambulance service. And in Montana, one of the hospitals approached me and asked me if I wanted to come to work for them. Full-time EMT position with their advanced life support ambulance. And they told me what the starting salary would be, and I about choked. Tell you what, it took me back to the prayer room. God, pray, God, you sure you want me to pastor? Man, this EMT gig over here looks pretty tempting. The salary was 4 times what I was getting. God came through and said, I called you to this. And his pastor friend, he was just so upset that they would just market this thing in church leadership. It's just some job choice. Peter writes this out of his own personal experiences with Christ. There's some things he references in this chapter. He references the Mount of Transfiguration. He mentions, the sheep and the shepherd. We're going to look at those again in just a few moments. Christ's lesson on true spiritual greatness. We're going to look at that yet this morning. Being clothed with humility. Jesus washing the disciples' feet. Jesus' statement to them that Satan would sift them like wheat. He's writing this out of his own personal experiences with Christ. Peter had this personal relationship with Jesus. Now, he'd had the unfortunate story of failing Jesus, denying Jesus, but Jesus coming back and fully restoring him. So, all this personal relationship with Jesus. He wants us to understand leaders must have a continuing personal experience with him. And we got to cultivate that growing relationship with Jesus. If it's not growing, it's stagnant. And stagnant stinks. We don't want to be there. So we need to have this growing relationship with Jesus. Not a one-time, we can point back to something somewhere back when. But this growing relationship with Jesus. If you want a true leadership role, whether it's in church, in any area of ministry, whether it's in business, whether it's in your home, this is where it begins. Growing personal relationship. Now, the second characteristic that Peter talks to is a loving concern for God's people. Loving concern for God's people. Now, we're going to still stay in verse 1 for just a moment, because I'm not sure why they put these verse breakdowns where they did, but we'll see at the end of verse 1. As a fellow elder, this is my appeal to you. Care for the flock of God entrusted to you. Watch over it willingly, not grudgingly, not for what you will get out of it, but because you are eager to serve God. Don't lord it over the people assigned to your care. Lead them by your good example. Care for the flock. The image of the flock of the sheep and the shepherd is often used in the Bible. And Peter heard Jesus talk about that quite often. John chapter 10. Jesus said, I'm the good shepherd. Peter was familiar with that, and he had heard Jesus talk about it a lot. He says, care for God's flock. There's some common ground in that illustration between sheep and the church. But I'll also, let's expand that out. How about sheep, okay, the people in business, in your business? How about in your family? And what's the leader? What's the shepherd called to do? Protection and provision. To protect the sheep. That's one of the highest callings of leadership, both in the church and in the family. To protect the sheep. To lead them, Psalm 22, talk about leading them to pasture, leading them to food, the things that will sustain them, the necessities of life, water, food, those kinds of things, to lead them to that. Also, there's supervision and discipline that's common ground. Supervision to watch out over them. And when one goes missing, we're like, chalk that up as a loss. No. Go look for the one. Peter remembers Jesus telling the story of the lost sheep. So that's supervision rule and discipline. To discipline the rebellious. You see those pictures of the shepherd carrying the sheep on his shoulders. You know why he's doing that? I found this out when I was in Israel. I actually got one of these carved out of olive wood. Actually, we ended up with two of them now. It's on a shelf in my office, this olive wood carving of the sheep, or excuse me, the shepherd with the staff with the sheep on his shoulders. Well, sir, the reason he's carrying them is because he intentionally broke that sheep's leg. What the shepherd did, he intentionally broke the sheep's leg, because unfortunately, this was a rebellious sheep. And it was a sheep that liked to wander. And sheep that like to wander get eaten. So, in his protective state, the shepherd takes the sheep and breaks his leg. And he carries it. And in the carrying of the sheep, there's a bonding that happens. The leg heals, but there's this bonding that happens. When that leg is healed and he lets it go, the sheep stays right with the shepherd. There's this discipline, the rebellion. Now, the same chapter in Luke, where Jesus tells the story of the lost sheep, he also tells the story of the lost son, the prodigal son, a rebellious son that wanders away. And what happens there? So, that's part of this common ground between sheep and the shepherd and the church. And then there's instruction and there's direction, caring for the special needs, teaching the sheep, directing them. This is take the oversight of it. Effective leaders must be both among the flock and over the flock. Got to be part of the family as well as over it. It says, watch over it willingly, not grudgingly. Watch over it, this oversight. He points out some dangers here. There's a tendency among some that can lead to laziness and greed. He says, watch over it willingly, not grudgingly. Not for what you get out of it, but because you are eager to serve God. He's taking the oversight of it. And then in verse 3, he says, don't lord it over them. Assign to your care, but lead them by your good example. It shows a contrast between dictatorship and leadership. And what a huge contrast that is. Any of you ever work in a job where the boss is a dictator? That's not fun, is it? I didn't work there very long. But yeah, no. I'm not cut out for this. That's what we now refer to as a toxic work environment, right? When it's a dictatorship and not leadership. Sometimes those lines get blurred even in the home. And it's not about dictatorship. It's about leadership. When you study through God's Word, you find He did not design a hierarchy for the church. He provided structure, but not a hierarchy. That's also important in the family. Don't lord it over the people assigned to you. Remember what Jesus said when the disciples were arguing over who was the greatest? Back in Luke chapter 22, beginning verse 24. His disciples. Now, Jesus had just told them he's going to Jerusalem. They're going to arrest him. They're going to kill him. This is what he's just said. And what are the disciples doing? They're arguing among themselves as to who would be the greatest in the coming kingdom. Really? This is what they got him. Jesus just tells them this, and they're arguing over who's going to be the greatest in the coming kingdom? And what does Jesus tell them? Verse 25. In this world, the kings and great men order their people around. Some of the other translations there use kind of the same wording that Peter used. They lord it over those around them. And yet they're called friends of the people. That's what they're called. Though they're lording it over, this dictatorship. But verse 26, what he says, among you, those who are the greatest should take the lowest rank. And the leader should be like a servant. So it's this dynamic of being among them, and yet still over the flock. That's what Peter's writing to these churches from a position of leadership. But he says, hey, I'm writing this to you, but I'm one of you. I'm not here and you here. No, he said, I'm writing this as one of you. In a sense, kind of saying, I'm writing this to myself as well. And then he gives them the third dynamic of leadership principle. That is simply to say, desire to please God alone. We desire to please God alone. Verse 4, and when the head shepherd comes, your reward will be a never-ending share. Peter brings in again the promise of the Lord. Many of them, hey, it's what kept them, helped them to get up in the morning, go about the activities of their day. This promise. Jesus said he was going to return. Unfortunately, in our day to day, that seems to have gotten shoved so far to the back burner sometimes. I'm sure. I think it's not even on the stove anymore. It's so far out of our thinking. We get so caught up with just the day-to-day grind. We forget Jesus made a promise. He's coming. And Peter brings it in, and in some future dynamics in Peter's writings, yet we're going to be coming back to that. Peter's going to address that some more. And the head shepherd comes. So he reminds them, even though their leadership, they're still also a leader over them. They're not the ultimate authority. There's a head shepherd that they're still accountable to. And these days he's going to come and there's going to be an account. But in the meantime, who's this leader supposed to please? In our current structure, we have U.S., not around the world, really. I love this in Luke chapter 7, verse 35, and this is the Message translation. He just writes, opinion polls don't count for much, do they? You see so much in our world dictated by opinion polls. What's the popular bent of the people? And then let's go there. You know what opinion polls are? Okay. Years ago, I was again in Montana. I was Royal Ranger leader. Royal Rangers is our boys ministry. And we had taken a whole van load of boys up to a Pinewood Derby contest, another church, and it was several hours drive away from us. Oh, boy. A whole van load of boys in there, It was a lot of fun, but it was a challenge. But we were on our way home. And we stopped at a truck stop, for the kids to use the restroom and all that fun stuff. They had a hat, and I need to get online someday. I probably could find it. I've always regretted not buying the hat that day. But they had a hat that I've never seen before, and I'll be honest, I've never seen it since either. That kind of a baseball-style hat, but the hat had two bills coming off it instead of one. Had two bills coming off of it. And I will never forget the statement on the hat. It said this, where did they go? For I must follow them, for I am their leader. Oh, there's been a lot of days I felt like that. And that day I really felt like that. Where did they go? For I must follow them, for I am their leader. That's opinion polls. If we're looking for what the latest opinion poll is, that's that hat. Where did they go? For I must follow them, for I am their leader. Is that leadership? That's not leadership. But Jesus says here, opinion polls don't count for much, do they? The leader has to have a desire to please God alone. Can't try to please others. That's futile. There's no way anybody can please everybody. Even Jesus didn't please everybody, did he? Because they kind of crucified him. So, yeah, he didn't really please everybody either. Neither can we. We can't even really try to just please ourselves. Because that's kind of futile. I've got a sign in my office that says, of course I talk to myself. Sometimes I need expert advice. But, the challenge when you talk to yourself is when you're not even paying attention to what you're saying to yourself. It's like, what was that all about? Oh, yeah, I guess we'll go back and review the conversation. Pleasing ourselves is hopeless. We try to please God alone. We gauge success not by human standards, but by God's standards. Human standards are really fickle. Here's what he tells us here. There is a reward coming. In 1 Peter 5:4, I'm going to put it up here now in the New King James Version translation. When the chief shepherd appears, he will receive the crown of glory. He said, if you follow this leadership plan, when the chief shepherd appears, you'll receive the crown of glory. I've only been watching the FIFA World Cup soccer stuff on TV. You've been kind of following that. Just a few. Okay. I know, U.S. isn't a big soccer country, but I've been kind of following it when I can, because a lot of our trip we weren't able to kind of stay in tune with what's going on. This afternoon's the final. Unless something happens, I'm going to be watching that. These people compete, and I'll be honest, I'm not sure there's another sport that requires the athleticism that soccer does. These guys and gals in the women's side, they are crazy. I've watched some of these where they are on that pitch, they call it, field, for over 2 hours. Straight. There's no break. Well, in the U.S., because of the heat, they actually inserted in here a hydration break because these guys were cramping up so bad that they had to give them hydration breaks now. And many of them have been playing in the excessive heat that we have had earlier this week. Last Sunday, when I left Montana to come back here, last Sunday, Billings, Montana recorded an all-time high of 111 degrees. I was helping my son Travis on Saturday. It was 107 degrees. That's in the shade. I pulled out my heat gun. The metal of his tractor that we'd been trying to work on showed 154 degrees. You couldn't touch it without gloves because it'll burn you. So they're playing, and these guys for a couple hours are back and forth on that field. And they're going full bore back and forth on this field for a couple hours in that kind of heat. And I'm like, I never could have done that. Never could have done that. The athleticism that they have, competing for what? To get that crown. Crowned the champion. But it's a crown that fades. Because you know what? The ones that won like 4 years ago, most of them aren't even playing. The team's still there. Most of them, they're not. The team's all different. Sometimes people don't even remember the name. There's like one name they might remember off the team. Everybody else just fades. into oblivion. The crown that Peter talks about here was the athlete's crown, typically like for the Olympic Games. But you know what it was? All it was a garland of leaves and flowers. What's going to happen to that? That's going to just crumble. He says, you're going to receive a crown of glory that does not eternal reward for fulfilling the role God has called us to. We don't work for that kind of temporary crown of glory. We work to hear Christ's statement, well done, and faithful servant. Let's just kind of wrap this up. Leader. And again, I want us to think about this in the broadest context. It's for the church, in any area of leadership in church. I'll touch on some like that in a moment again. Whether it's in business or work setting, your home, here's how a leader's work is to be done for the right reason. Not because they have to, but because they want. Just look at them. It's done for the right, not because they have to, because they want. And along with that comes number two, with the right motive. Not for material gain, but for the joy of doing. I'm in that place of it's kind of amazing place of getting paid to do it. I did kind of miss this. Have the right motive, right reason. And then the third, in the right manner. Not driving, but leading. Not domineering, but setting an example. In the right manner. Growing up, we'd go up in the mountains in Montana, take our horses, and head up into Mountain Lake, or a lot of times in the fall, heading up into our elk hunting camp we had up in the mountains. And they had grazing permits in a lot of these areas. And there were some lower areas that were cattle, but mostly up at the mountains were sheep. A lot of times when we were going in, particularly into our elk camp, they were bringing the sheep out of the high country. But my dad and I, when we talk about, we always noticed they were behind driving the sheep. Most of them had dogs, sheep dogs. These Australian sheep dogs, I've watched some of them work. They are amazing. It's crazy amazing. How do they work? Jesus says, Jesus said, the sheep know my voice. They follow me. That was the style of shepherding. It still is in a lot of that area in the Middle East. They open up the sheep pen, and there might be 4 or more shepherds. They all have their sheep together in the same pen. Sheep fold. And it's like, well, how are they going to separate them out in the morning? Not a problem. They just open the gate. The shepherds all head off in different directions. Sheep just come out and they follow their shepherd. They know his voice. We witnessed some of this many years ago when I had an opportunity to visit Israel. And they would take off and they kind of sing a little song. And a lot of it, it's a song they made up that's the name of their sheep. Yes, they have a name. And the shepherd just takes off, and as they go off singing the song, these sheep all just come out of the fold and just follow They're a shepherd. And that's still the way they do it. Do it in the right manner, not driving, but leading. Not domineering, but setting an example. And the last, we realize that we are serving the chief shepherd. He will reward us. There's a reward there, but we're not the end all. We're serving the chief shepherd. Everything in the local church, everything in the family, rises or falls with leadership. No matter what the position of leadership, whether it's pastor, whether it's deacon, whether it's a teacher, a Wednesday night ministry leader, worship team, women's ministries, men's ministry, youth ministries, everything, kids ministry, all of it rises or falls with leadership. So that leader has to be, first of all, a follower. Growing relationship with a follower. And one of the series we did with our youth here, it's been actually quite a number of years ago now, and we did it with our men's group as well, was some stuff. I think the guy's name, the leader's name is Kyle Edelman. And the title of the material was Not a Fan. You know, we live in the social media. Click on as a fan. And so I'm now a follower of such and such a celebrity. Now, I clicked on their profile and I'm a fan. So, and the more engagement I have on their page, the higher up the fan level I get. That I can become, labeled top fan on this page. And so Kyle's teaching in this material, and it was excellent stuff. It's just in the church, we can end up kind of in there. Oh, we got on Jesus' social media page, and I clicked that I'm a fan. And so, I engage with him once in a while and on some social media site, and now I'm a top fan. But do I know him? No, never met him. I don't know him. Do they know me? That's even worse yet in the spiritual sense. No. It's not about being a fan. It's about being a disciple of Christ. A growing relationship with him. Not just knowing about him, vital personal relationship. And having a loving concern for the people of our ministry, people at our job place, family, this loving concern for the people. Finally, a real desire to please Jesus. Serve him. Wait, Jesus did it? Not much more yet. But Jesus coming in and washing the disciples' feet. Let's stand together this morning. Lord, we're grateful that you teach us. Here we see these words of Peter today, just a few verses, powerfully speaking into our lives today about leadership. And I think around the room today, I'm going to say probably everybody in the room, in some way, in a position of leadership, somewhere. You can grab something from what we have looked at in your word today and say, that's for me. And maybe even see an area in our lives that's like, okay, Holy Spirit, you're speaking to me. I need to work on that. You're challenging us today. Being leaders, you've called us. Pointing people to Jesus. We are so blessed, Lord, to be part of your family. We just submit ourselves into your leadership, Lord. We know, and we acknowledge it again today, you're the lead shepherd. Whatever we do is under your leadership. Lord, you lead, we'll follow. And then, Lord, we'll step into places of leadership that you place us so that others can join that journey with us, following after you. Speak into our lives today. How we follow you. And Lord, maybe there's been some time when we've kind of done our own thing. Stepped out of what you wanted us to do and kind of thought maybe we knew better in this setting. Lord, help us to just pull back in line. Keep our eyes on you. Follow you as you lead and lead others. Pray in Jesus' name. Amen. There's a song I want us to sing as we just wrap up this morning.